Happiness flows with gentle boundaries. Freedom breathes within this circle. Open circle, we are here. Open circle, drawing near. We unlearn what once confined us. We remember who we are. Kindness given without condition. Freedom held with quiet strength. Open circle, we are here. Open circle, drawing near. You are welcome in this space. You are safe to simply be. Take your time and find your voice, or just rest in quiet presence. Open circle, we are here. Open circle, drawing near. Open circle, holds us now. Open circle, soft and true. Open circle, breathing slow. Open circle, we are. Open circle, holds us now. Open circle, soft and true. Open circle, breathing slow. Open circle, we are. The Enigma machine, it's frightening, running on lightning, transdimensional whispers, secrets of our fears. In this manner of mysteries, truth revealed. Enigma machine.
Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm Matthew Millais Gray. Today's subject is a question. It's a question that's posed by a viewer, and it goes something like this. What if they're right? That's the question. Comes up again and again for those that emerge, I'm going to say, from abusive high control spiritual environments or situations where things have gone wrong in a high control spiritual environment, in that situation. Now, it sounds simple, but it carries enormous emotional weight. Just that question. But what if they're right? Now, I want to approach this question carefully because it doesn't just come from nowhere. For many, it's tied deeply to embedded imagery, often formed from childhood, the formative years. So you could have, say, for instance, vivid end of world scenarios, survival narratives, and a sense that safety depends on remaining within a very, how can I say, specific structure within, yes, that high control environment. The one where, you know, somebody's woken up from it or started questioning something because they see there's a harm, or they've experienced harm, or some kind of ethical contradiction. Doesn't even have to be doctrinal, though that could also come into it. So this idea, this question, what if they're right? When there's especially accompanying embedded imagery, let's say a dream of like an end of world scenario. For Jehovah's Witnesses, it would be like an Armageddon dream. Okay, meteors from the sky, or you know, some kind of nuclear outcome. Those impressions don't just vanish. They can surface, like we say, in dreams. They can surface as anxiety or a lingering sense of dread. So instead of just dismissing the question, let's see if we can examine it. It starts with any institution that claims unique authority over truth, right? Because somebody says, oh, if I'm questioning it, I'm leaving the truth. Now remember, that's the psychology of the high control religion. It's not unique to Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way. It's not. You can have that in what was called the Moonies organization. You could have that in fact, I'm going to try and steer clear from the names, although I've mentioned names. But high control environments, the institution that claims unique authority over truth, right? Especially divine truth. And this can happen even in governments. This is the divine truth. This is the divine way. We can reasonably ask, what is its track record? Fair question. Not its intentions, not its rhetoric, but its observable history. You could say its fruits. Has it demonstrated consistency, for instance? Has it shown transparency? And how has it been accountable when it makes mistakes, or its key players, or its key guardians, or its key leaders make mistakes and expected obedience? These aren't hostile questions. They are actually the foundation of what we say is ethical inquiry. It's the best we've got as humans. Because if something is true, and I'm saying deeply, foundationally true, it should withstand scrutiny. It shouldn't require fear. Fear to sustain that belief. It shouldn't punish those who ask sincere questions, especially if they've persisted respectfully. And so when we look at the historical records, which has been my experience of Jehovah's Witnesses, Jehovah's Witness leadership, we see specific time-bound expectations that didn't materialize. You could say 1975 was one, but then that gets argued. No, that didn't happen. This is why there has been, I'm going to venture, publication destruction, right? Like articles where children were spoken to as being told, no, you know, there's no time to go and get married. There's no time to go and finish higher education. The end's here.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
In more recent times, you've got we're in the final part of the last days. Okay? Maybe you can quote that more accurately than I can. But, okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about these time-bound expectations that just don't materialize. Right? So we see patterns where the teachings evolve, but they're presented as if they've remained consistent. And so that's what creates the tensions, not just doctrinally, but ethically. Oh, this is becoming so clear that it's not just doctrine, it's the actual ethics. What do we mean? Well, consider these questions. What happens when individuals raise concerns? Because this is going to reveal the ethics. What happens when harm is reported? Not just some person who's retaliating. Not just some person who's got a wish to bring down the institution. I'm talking about when there's actual harm that's witnessed, that's documented, that's seen. What happens when harm is reported? What happens when somebody actually simply asks for clarification? So, no, I want to do the right thing. I want to remain obedient within the system. I just want clarification. Maybe it's a dilemma. Maybe it's a catch-22 situation. Just want clarification.
Do you accept corporal punishment?
No.
You don't?
Not personally, no. And not as an organisation. We don't encourage it.
But do you prohibit it?
Our literature has pointed out that the true way to discipline children is by educating them, not giving corporal punishment. Your Honour, I can only tell you the spirit behind our writings.
In any healthy system, those moments are opportunities for reflection and for growth. Okay? But in some cases, they appear to be treated as threats. And then you get institutional preserve.
You spread the jam across the bread, rules above the living dead. Policy sweet, the people toast, efficiency first. We eat the most. Yeah, baby, institutional preserve over individual welfare toast. Preserve the name, erase the face, wipe the tear and hold your place. Your welfare's noted, just not heard. Now sign the form, ignore the word. Darlings, it's institutional preserve over individual welfare toast. argues it's protocol. Disagree, well that's emotional. Uphold the frame, don't break the shrine. The system's pure, you cross the line. Institutional preserve over individual welfare toast. So here's our jam, it's spread with pride. The individuals, Christ on the side. Preservation now available in every nation. Institutional preserve over individual welfare toast. Institutional preserve over individual welfare toast.
Now, this isn't merely a theological issue. Let's get this one very clear. It's a question of governance, of psychology, and of power. And so when you get an investigation like the Australian Royal Commission into institutional responses to, I'm going to say it, child sexual abuse. That's what the ARC was for. Okay? It highlighted systemic concerns, not just about one group, but about institutional behavior more broadly. And similar tensions are being examined globally, including in places like Norway, where the balance between religious freedom and individual rights is under active consideration. So let's just widen the lens, come out a bit, because this isn't about one religion alone. It's about a recurring human pattern. This is frontline stuff. Institutions, religious, political, or otherwise, developing these mechanisms to preserve themselves. Right? Extensive law cases, extensive time between a report of abuse and trying to lock it down. That is the front line. And we as humans are shaking those foundations, because there is this institutional mechanism, or set of mechanisms, these complex mechanisms to preserve themselves. And this is at the expense of the individuals within them. This is the tension. Now, alongside this, there's something else, because we go to history, accurate history. Take a look at across cultures, and we see a parallel thread. And it's a movement towards truth. It's towards conscience. You can say toward what might be called a higher ethic. I say supreme law, supreme natural law. But let's say a higher ethic. Now, some would frame this in spiritual terms, others in philosophical terms, or psychological terms, but it persists. So if you want to say a myth like Atlantis, right, whether it's taken literally or symbolically, the story isn't just about collapse. There's this, peak civilization, peak technology. It's about continuity. Now, humanity endures. Isn't that interesting? So awareness re-emerges. Something learns. And so we find ourselves in a dynamic tension, the institutional and the individual. I'm going to say the sacred and the profane. Bring that in. Or the structure and the conscience. And in that space, we have a responsibility to remain honest. Honest enough to form a working thesis. Matt, there you go again. Yes. Honest enough to form a working thesis. Honest enough to challenge it with an antithesis, antithesis. And disciplined enough to seek a synthesis grounded in evidence, not just fear. And because without that balance, we risk drifting into certainty without a foundation, or skepticism without direction. And either extreme can become harmful. So there's a telling moment from testimony. Let's get back to the question, what if they're right? So the telling moment from testimony given during the Australian Royal Commission in the JW world, Jehovah's Witness world, Jeffrey Jackson, a senior figure, a governing body member, he was asked whether his group, governing body, his organization was the only channel of truth, divine truth. It's this ultimate truth. What was his response? We can go and take a look at it. Go and take a look. What was the word structure? What was said? His response was that such a claim would be presumptuous.
And do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That, I think, would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using. The scriptures clearly show that someone can act in harmony with God's Spirit in giving comfort and help in the congregations. But if I could just clarify a little, going back to Matthew 24, clearly Jesus said that in the last days, and Jehovah's Witnesses believe these are the last days, there would be a slave, a group of persons who would have responsibility to care for the spiritual food. So in that respect, we view ourselves as trying to fulfill that role.
Now that answer given under oath is worth reflecting on for this question. What if they're right? Because if even the highest level of leadership refrains from making an absolute claim to exclusive truth in that context, then the burden shifts back to the individual. Not to fear, but to elevate, right? So you go, well, what have I learned? Yeah, all of that is valuable because it makes you who you are now to be able to evaluate. So what if they're right? Then truth will hold under examination. It won't collapse under pressure. And it'll not depend on coercion or silence. Being silenced. Shut up, shut up, shut up. And if you don't shut up, we're going to make you shut up. And yeah, yet on the other hand, the evidence shows inconsistency, lack of accountability, and psychological pressure, then we're dealing with not ultimate truth, but with a human system. That's what it is. We're not dealing with that ultimate truth. It's a system that individuals have every right to join and every right to leave safely. So the final question is not what if they're right, but rather what does the evidence show and what does your own conscience recognize when it is free to respond. That is where clarity begins. I want to say thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for the question and for stimulating the channel or myself to be able to participate in this kind of way. I truly appreciate that very, very much, and think that this is important for these kind of explorations. So big thanks, big appreciation. Thank you for being here. Yes, you are the reason we are here.
Halls at the lights, bone fake nerve fries, sermon stains dulling mine, hypno grit relentless grind, love's